The Walking Dead has been one of those shows that just captured my imagination from the very beginning. It's one of those that I purely enjoyed and couldn't wait to watch week by week. I came to it right as we were getting into season 6, so I binged the first 5 seasons and I could not get enough of this world. It was incredible to experience, incredible to witness. It's one of those that, as it went on, I think I just fell out of love with it, as much of the audience did over the years. Going deep into the seasons that dealt with the survivors, Negan's group versus Rick's group, I just felt that the show was losing what made it so special at the beginning. It was purely about the survival of these people, what they were trying to do to get through this world. Unfortunately, I think the show lost its way. The character drama, I feel like, was being lost in favor of the action, in favor of so much that is not what the show was built upon. I fell out of love with the show. Now, season 9, I feel like, really was getting back to the essence of the early parts of the show. We changed showrunners. It was no longer Scott Gimple. We had a new showrunner. And as we were going into this season, I just felt like there was a renewed interest in the show I was watching. I couldn't wait to see where the show was going to go, hoping that it would get back to the heights of what I had experienced early on when I was binging those first couple of seasons. Unfortunately, the worst part about this was we were losing Rick Grimes. It was advertised at the very beginning of the show that Rick would be leaving after the 5th episode of season 9. And with Rick's exit, it became my exit as well, and I felt maybe that should be it. However, it was announced that Rick Grimes was coming back, and we were told at the end of his exit that that was not the last we would see of Rick. We were supposed to get a trilogy of movies that never came to pass, but I think after watching this first episode of The Ones Who Live, I think this was actually the better way to go with it. Keep it on TV. This is where we fell in love with this character. This is where we should continue our love with this character. And the fact that it's not only Rick, but Michonne coming along with him, their chemistry works so well off of each other, and so this show wouldn't work without one or the other. You can't have this show without Michonne, you can't have this show without Rick. Their pairing together is what makes this show so worth watching. And with that, let's get into the first episode of The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live. We first meet Rick Grimes in a very unassuming manner when we open with the first episode of The Walking Dead. He's driving along a country road, not really knowing what this is about. When I first watched it, I hadn't read the comics, so I knew next to nothing about this world. So watching that first scene was so eerie. And as he comes up on cars overturned, a campsite that had been made on the side of the road, you realize something bad happened. And Rick coming upon that little girl, who we thought was a little girl, and he's still acting as a police officer in this instance. And he's telling her, "How can I help you? Let me help you." And as she turns, he realizes the horror that she has turned, that she's no longer one of the living. And so Rick pulls out his Colt Python and without hesitation shoots her. It's a moment that you still realize is sitting with Rick. He's not used to this. He's not an experienced walker killer at this point. It's so different seeing where he was at the beginning of the apocalypse to where he is now. And as you grow with him throughout the show, just that change of who he was, trying to hold on to the old world and becoming more and more of this person who is realizing he must do whatever is necessary to both keep him alive and the people he cares about alive. That's all that matters in the end. It's not about the way we used to live. It's about the here and the now. He's always been this reluctant hero. He's never wanted this title of leader, and it's something that he just falls into because of the person that he is. Because of the person that he is, the people around him feel like they can trust him, that they can trust their lives with him. And again, going back to this person that he was, after everything he went through, the battle with Shane at the beginning, everything at the prison, the governor, everything with Terminus, the saviors, everybody that came up against him and his group. It all shaped him into the person he would end up being, this ultimate leader, the leader of these people. And yet in the end, he's still trying to get back to his family, trying to keep those he loves safe. And that's where we left him in season 9 of The Walking Dead. His last words, I found them. When he's on that bridge facing down the walkers, it's not about his own safety. He will put his life on the line to keep his family safe. Ultimately, that's all he cared about. He's ready to say, this is over, this is it. And I think I was okay with that. I didn't want him to leave the show, but as far as the end of his character arc, I thought we hit a really good place with him. But lo and behold, we find out Rick is not dead. Jadis comes in, saves him, says, no, I don't have an A. I never had an A. I've got a B. And sends him to the CRM, a whole government agency, a military organization that has been formed in the background that is trying to hold on to what the old world was and rebuild. They're trying to rebuild civilization. And Rick is now finding himself in the middle of that. We don't see Rick again until the finale of The Walking Dead, the end of the series. And I'll be fully honest, I haven't seen the remaining episodes of Season 9 when Rick's gone. I never watched those, and I haven't seen Seasons 10 or 11. I know a little bit here and there from what I've heard online, but I haven't seen those episodes in their entirety. I just never got back to it. But I did, however, learn that Rick had returned at the end of The Walking Dead. At the end of the show, he shows up. And that teases and sets up where are we going with this character into The Ones Who Live. Those moments tee up this show specifically, and it's really intriguing to see where it was going to go. After watching this first episode, I am so excited to see where this is going to go. We see Rick in a place that we haven't seen him in a long time, and that's a place of desperation. I think the last time I remember seeing Rick this broken was in Season 7 after he dealt with Negan. After Negan broke him so bad at the beginning of that first episode, at the end of that first episode of Season 7, I haven't seen Rick broken like this since then. But this is a different type of broken. It's not that same level of fear. I think more maybe it's a fear of losing his life so that he can't get back to Michonne, that he can't get back to Judith. He's caring so much, he's trying so hard, and we find out that we jump 5 years after the bridge. And Rick is doing whatever he can to get back. We find out he tried to escape 4 times. This is the 4th time. And we get to this point. It's something that the show always avoided, but now we see the comic accurate Rick. The Rick who loses his hand in a different way, because I believe in the comics he lost his hand to the governor. But this time around, he cuts off his own hand to free himself from the chain so that he can then escape. And man, it was rough seeing that. You can tell as soon as he does it, he's losing so much blood. He's losing so much energy. He's about to collapse. He then cauterizes his stump in a burnt Walker body. That takes so much out of him in that moment. It was crazy. This is one of the best performances that Andrew Lincoln has given as Rick Grimes. I was fully bought in with everything he was doing. His rebellious nature of trying to escape and then realizing, okay, now I'm going to buy into this. I'm going to join up with the CRM, but not because of what they want. I'm going to use this. He's talking to his friend on the park bench. Esteban approaches him, and he says something that gets Rick thinking, if you can't beat him, maybe join him. As he goes through this, he's preparing. Every little bit he's preparing. He's like, I'm going to make my escape. I'm going to make my escape. We then jump to 6 years after the bridge incident. And he then goes and tries to make another escape. Rick is then convinced by Thorne, who he's built up a relationship with. A kind of a tenuous relationship, but he's built up a relationship with nonetheless. And she kind of pulls him into this place of, stop trying to rebel. Every time you do that, you're going to get yourself killed. We're in the here and the now, and she's trying to convince Rick, stop going down this path that is ultimately just going to lead to your destruction. And in reality, she's right. It probably is. Because yes, Rick wants to get back to his family, but we also find out that in doing so, Okafor, he knows about Rick's family. And he tells him plain and simple, if you go after your family, I'm going to have no choice but to kill you and to kill them. Because this is a man that cares only about his duty. We find out that he went to so much lengths that he even sacrificed his wife in favor of the duty that he was trying to serve. He cares only about his mission, only about his duty. And after all this fighting, after all this resisting, Rick finally comes to this point of, I tried. He keeps saying, believe me, I tried. He's been writing these journals out to Michonne saying that this is my one little connection to you. And I know you weren't going to get any of these letters, but it's allowing him to process what's going on. Writing letters to Michonne, and yet knowing that she'll never get these. He really feels like he's on his own. Rick even admits he tries to end his own life. We see that. He takes the piece of glass against his neck, and he tries to end his own life. He's like, this is it. There's no hope here. So why should I continue? And I believe it's what Thorne said to him. She comes to him and says, you're a good man. You're one of the last good men I know. And it'd be better for you to be here in this world, helping us build a better society. And then Rick also realizes everything I was doing, everything I was trying to do would be for nothing if I just ended it here. while he attempts to return to you. Everything that he did before the events of the bridge would have been for nothing. And so he finally comes to a place where he buys into what the CRM is going to do. Mainly because of everything that Thorne said, and maybe a little bit of what Okafor said. He realizes maybe this is the only life I've got. It's either do this or die. And so we see that Rick is now bought in. He's a soldier of the CRM. And we then see him go out on a mission with Okafor. They're in a helicopter. Rick's done his training. He now knows how to pilot a helicopter. And as they're going through, they have this conversation. Rick's having this conversation about a memory he had from childhood. And as we end the conversation, which is a really deep conversation, we get more of an insight on who Rick's father was. And now we get more of an insight into who Rick was before the apocalypse, before he was even an adult. And as the conversation's coming to a close, Okafor's talking, and they're attacked. Out of the blue, attacked. Missiles firing. Rick realizes Okafor's been impaled, and then boom, he blows up. They're in the midst of chaos, don't know really what's going on. Rick tries to take control of the scenario. Helicopters hit, taken down, they crash land. And then as they escape, Rick and the remaining survivors, remaining soldiers in the helicopter, they escape, try to fight off who's coming after them. And we see somebody with a sword coming after the remaining guys. And then I'm like, okay, I know this is Michonne. It's got to be Michonne. And I know this is only the first episode, so she's not going to kill Rick. But man, she got close. And if it wasn't for Michonne taking off Rick's helmet, oh, that would have scarred her like no other, realizing that she almost killed her husband. But we have that realization. The two of them finally meet up, and then we go right into credits. That was it. Left on such a high point, and then episode's over. Gotta say, this is one of the best episodes in the Walking Dead universe I've seen in a very long time. This episode had me gripped from start to finish. I was so excited at the end of this, so hooked, so gripped, couldn't wait to see what was going to happen in episode 2. If I'm going to give this episode a quick ranking, it's got to be a 5 out of 5 or an A+ on the letter scale. I don't normally give episodes or movies perfect scores like this, and it might be just my hype, my excitement for what is to come, and maybe it's because I haven't been this excited for something in the Walking Dead universe in a long time, but I was so gripped from start to finish. And now we get into episode 2, Gone. The second episode of The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live, was simply incredible. Something I was a little concerned with going into it was not that it would be Michonne focused, but that it would be not until the end of the episode that we would see the reunion between Rick and Michonne like we did at the end of the first episode. Thankfully, it's something that we were able to get to 3/4 of the way through, but the stuff with Michonne is simply incredible and both heartbreaking to witness. You can see a different level of writing on this series like we never really got with the original show about halfway towards the lifespan of The Walking Dead. I just think the writing started to fall off a little bit. I think the character drama started to fade away in favor of action sequences, in favor of the more astounding aspects of the show rather than the meticulous character work that was being done in the beginning of the show. So that was really nice to see this kind of getting back to what I initially grew to love about The Walking Dead, which was the character drama, the world building with everything that's going on with the CRM. That is something I've been really excited to see. I love the world building of this show. It's got me excited again. I fell off of this show back in season 9 when Rick left, and so now this just felt like the natural progression, my step back into the Walking Dead universe. It reminds me in a lot of ways of the Last of Us series that came out last year on HBO. The music specifically, it definitely has an homage to the Last of Us themes. You can tell there's inspiration from that series. But getting back to the stuff with Michonne, now we see her perspective. She was about to gut Rick. They see each other, and that's where we cut at the end of the first episode. So now we come into the beginning of the second episode. And what little I know of how the main series of The Walking Dead ended, Michonne came across these two people that Michonne rescues simply because she saw that they needed help. And it's something that in this world you don't see a lot of. You know, people are taken advantage of so many times. The weak are always hurt.
because the strong simply want to impose their will upon everybody, and to see somebody like Michonne who's going to go out of their way to save people who need help. It's refreshing to see both as an audience member, and I'm sure it's refreshing to see in the world of The Walking Dead. And it leads us to a group of people that I wasn't too sure about at the beginning, because anytime we were introduced to new side characters in The Walking Dead, towards the end I was always kind of annoyed with a lot of the new characters we would be introduced to. But these characters are so refreshing to meet. I immediately grew to like, and Nat, he was very entertaining to watch, and just to seeing the relationship that he built with Michonne, I just love that. And so it makes it that much more heartbreaking to witness what happens. And you really see the brutality of the CRM as they come across this group of people that they have no idea who they are. But in the CRM's eyes, if you're outside their walls, you're a threat to their organization, you're a threat to what they're doing. And it's simply heartbreaking to see what happens, because as the nomads, this group that Michonne has joined up with, start traveling through a city, they come across the CRM, or rather the CRM comes across them. They see these people, and then they launch this chlorine gas. It was so brutal to see the outcome of what this gas did. This was a group that I really thought would make it back to Alexandria with Michonne. I thought we might have a happy ending here, and it was so sad to see the outcome of what happened to these people, leaving only Michonne and Nat as the lone survivors of this group. And then we find out why it's taken so long for Michonne to get to Rick, is that they had to spend a whole winter recovering because of their injuries. Michonne has now lost even more time away from her kids and more time away from Rick. It's now only her and Nat, and they're at such a low point, thinking, this might be it. And as Nat and Michonne recover, Nat does tell her, believe a little bit longer. It's okay to go back home, go back to your family, and just believe a little bit longer. Believe that he's still out there. Doesn't mean you give up, it just means you go home, you recuperate, try again later. Believe a little bit longer. Nat, he's so profound. He has these great moments throughout the episode, and you really bond with him as a character. He became one of my favorite new characters on the entire show, and I wanted him to last. I wanted him to make it. But unfortunately, this is the world of The Walking Dead, and it doesn't always end happy for everyone. Nat and Michonne start their journey back to Alexandria, and as they are headed back, they find the helicopter. We're catching up to the point at the end of the first episode, and we see who was trying to take down the helicopter that Rick was in. Find out it was Nat and it was Michonne. We're caught up to the events of the end of the first episode. Michonne takes out the CRM soldiers, finds Rick. Unfortunately, one of the soldiers was still alive and kills Nat. I really wanted him to make it going forward. The show is called The Ones Who Live, but it seems to be the ones we lose. Does that mean Rick and Michonne are the only ones that are going to live in this show? We'll see. We'll find out. This was crazy, but now we're caught up with the events. After the heartbreaking loss of Nat, we're caught up with the events of episode 1. Rick and Michonne have reunited. And it was so great to see those two come back together, not only for Rick and Michonne, but I think for Denai and for Andrew Lincoln. You see the two actors, I think, are represented here too, and their reunion with each other and their chemistry unfolding. And it's something I don't think I really appreciated with the main Walking Dead show, was the relationship between Rick and Michonne. But seeing them interact here, I've got no complaints about their relationship with one another. You can really see the love between these two characters, and I think it is done perfect here. And so it's that much more heartbreaking to both lose Nat in this moment, and without hesitation, Rick kills the other CRM soldier, knowing that this person who Rick doesn't know, he knows that this person is important to Michonne. And so Rick does the thing that he would do in any circumstances. He goes and he ends the life of the soldier. And then it turns from a sweet reunion to terror on Rick's face. And again, this is a Rick that we have not seen. I don't think this is a Rick we've ever seen, because I think this is the most broken we've ever seen Rick. But the closest we've gotten to seeing Rick in this scenario is how we saw him with Negan in season 7 of The Walking Dead, when Rick was so broken by Negan. That is the closest we've seen to this Rick here. But that was still a Rick that had a little bit of rebellion stewing up inside him. This Rick here, that part of him's kind of being quelled. And you see little parts of it that come up here and there later. But this is a Rick that Michonne is going to have to get used to. This is a Rick that Michonne is not familiar with. The Rick that she knew is no longer here. And then we go from Rick having to tell her immediately, hey, you can't associate yourself with me. If they find out that we know each other, we're both dead. So in order to keep you alive, you gotta change your name, because they know about you. They know who you are. Okafor definitely did, and he probably passed that information on to other people. So in order to keep you safe, in order to keep both of us safe, and in order to keep everybody else safe that we know, and that we love, and we cherish, you got to change your name. You can't pose yourself as a leader, because now we know what an A means and what a B means. If you're an A, you're a leader and you're killed. If you're a B, you got a better chance of making it through. So pass yourself off as somebody who's not a leader. You can't show that you're good with a sword. You can't show that you were the one that killed these CRM agents. We have to pass that on as Nat being the one that did that. You can't refer to the walkers as walkers, because Rick calls them walkers, and that means that you would know that term because you know him. I love that they do point that out, that walkers is not a universal term. It is something that the Atlanta group was calling them. It was something that initially Morgan was calling them, and the Atlanta group was calling them because of Rick, and then the Alexandrians call them that because they're an extension of the Atlanta group. But each group has their own term for the infected, for the walkers, for the biters, the geeks, whatever you're going to call them. And so I love that Rick threw that little nugget in there. Hey, you can't call them that. Then he says, go with them, pass yourself off as somebody else, I will find you. And so she goes through orientation, she goes through this interview process. Now she's going by the name of Dana. So you're going to call yourself Dana, you're going to say you were part of a group, but now you've been on your own for a while. And it works. So Michonne gets in, she's Dana to the CRM, her and Rick meet up, reuniting with one another here and there in secret. Rick's trying to find out, how's everybody, how's Judith? And Michonne was about to tell Rick, you have a son. You have another son. His name's RJ. She held it back, and I'm very curious to see how Rick is going to react. It's got to throw him through a loop. This is a revelation that has definitely got to stick to him and hopefully kind of snaps him out of whatever's going in his head right now and pulls him back to the person that he was before. So Michonne holds back that revelation that Rick has a son. As they're talking to each other, Michonne finds out that Rick cut off his hand. And it's what Rick says, I think, that really gets to Michonne. And he says, it's one of the last times that I tried to get away. And she says, one of the last? She realizes he did try to escape several times, but eventually he had to quit. Eventually he gave up. She sees Rick as a man who gave up. And that's not who she knew. That's not who she fell in love with. It's not the Rick that she remembered. That's not the Rick she was hoping to find. But you gotta remember, they were separated for years. Rick has been with the CRM. He's possibly come around to their way of thinking, because at the end of the first episode, Rick has basically gone all in with Okafor. He's not going to escape anymore. He was giving up at the end of the first episode. There's going to be a challenge with Rick and Michonne going forward with how are they going to interact with one another? How are they going to move forward in their relationship? What's going to happen here? They're at a very different point than they've ever been before. And so it's really going to be interesting to see how they go forward. And now to skip ahead a little bit, we meet up with Rick. He enters his apartment, and there, sitting in the dark, is Jadis. And Jadis is not on his side anymore. Rick is not happy to see her. And we'll find out why in episode 3. Going through this episode, it was great. Now that Jadis is in the mix, this throws a whole other wrench in the plan, because it seems Rick was like, we're going to make our way out of the CRM. We're going to escape. And this is another thing, going back to when Rick and Michonne reunited, Rick's words are, I'm not with them. Well, he was. Technically, he was. Of course, he's not going to be against her, but he was with them. And he may not have been the one to release the gas on their group, but when they encountered each other, when Rick crashed in the helicopter, he was with them. So they're going to have to come to terms with what that means and how that defines their relationship. And so to give my final thoughts on this episode, I think it's another win for the Walking Dead universe. Absolutely loving what I'm watching. I can't wait to see what is going to happen week by week. It's the first time I'm looking forward to Walking Dead Sundays again, and that is so exciting as a Walking Dead fan. Somebody who used to be so into it and is now actually getting excited to get back into this universe. Cannot wait to see what's to come in episode 3. If I'm going to give this episode a ranking, I think I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5 or an A- on the letter scale. It's not quite the 5 out of 5 like last week's episode was, but I truly enjoyed this episode. It is definitely one of the best things we've seen in the entire Walking Dead universe. The character drama is so much deeper than it's been in a long time. I was gripped from the beginning to the very end of this episode. Cannot wait to see what we got going moving forward. And now let's continue with episode 3. Bye.
Each episode has such clear meaning, the first episode being years. It's been years since we've seen Rick Grimes. He's been gone for years, he's finally back, and we see a glimpse of his journey through the years into where he is now versus where he was when we saw him last on the bridge, when we saw him last at the end of The Walking Dead. And then we get into the second episode, titled Gone, and that has such a deep and multi-leveled meaning. Michonne is gone from her family. She left Judith, she left RJ, she left her people to go search for Rick. So she's been gone for years, and Rick's been gone for years. And unfortunately, the people she was with are gone. The group of nomads that were with her, Nat and the others, they're gone. And now we get into bye. And from what I can tell, the meaning of bye is it's Rick saying goodbye. He was going to say goodbye from the very first episode, saying goodbye to his hope of returning home. And here he's trying to tell Michonne they can't make it. This won't work. He tries to go out of his way to get her to leave, to go home. This won't end well for the two of them. The only way that she can get out is if he is here covering her tracks. The only way he was going to be able to get out is if somebody was on the inside covering his tracks, and he didn't have anybody for him, but Michonne has him. But you know that she's not going to fall for this. He tries to get her to go. She thinks that they were going to go together, but Rick has it set up to where he was just going to clear the way for her, and then he leaves her a note at the end saying, I can't go with you. I must stay here. Rick is kind of torn between whether or not he should stay here. He was buying into what the CRM was doing at the very end of the first episode. He was kind of buying into everything that Okafor was telling him, that Thorne's been telling him. He's kind of buying into this. He's like, well, maybe this is my path going forward. Maybe he just sees that this is where he is now. Maybe this is the only way he sees his existence. Maybe it's the only way he sees keeping Judith and Michonne and, unbeknownst to him, RJ safe. And so he chooses this life. He chooses to stay at the CRM. Of course, you know Michonne is not going to leave Rick. She went through all of this to get to him, lost so much to get to him. She's not just going to up and leave. She is not going to give up that easy. And it was the same thing that happened with Rick and Negan in season 7. Rick is tough as nails, but when he gets down, he gets down. And it's always up to Michonne to pick him back up. It's always up to Michonne to straighten him out, get his head on straight. I think that's what's going to happen here, and it's what we see at the very end of the episode when she pulls him out of the helicopter. One way or another, we're going together, and I'm getting you out of here whether you like it or not. That was crazy, and I'm really curious to see where we're going in episode 4. In the end, his choice is going to be, are we fighting back, or are we on the run? And I think we know it's going to end up being a fight against the CRM. But hopefully it's not just a fight with Rick and Michonne. Let's see if they get some other people to come in. Let's see if we can get Daryl on the team. Rick and Negan reuniting. Let's get Morgan Jones in here. Let's get some other people in here to see what's going to happen here. But it's just really interesting to see this different side of Rick. A side that I'm not used to seeing, but a side that I understand, and a side that Andrew Lincoln is playing very well. And we get some explanation in this episode, especially with the phone drawings. We see the artist behind it all. We see that that's actually what he does. He draws on phones. He draws on TVs. He knows Michonne right away. He knows her name. He knows who Judith is, and mentions that he tried to draw the face of Carl, but couldn't get it right. And it was nice to get that little mention of Carl. We lost Carl in season 8 of The Walking Dead, and it's nice to get that little reference to him. You know, Rick is never going to forget his son, and neither is Michonne, and it was really nice to see that little touch, that little callback. And it's where Michonne gets this confirmation. She was really let down by Rick not going with her there at the end. She's like, what is this? Are you not going to go through with this? Are you going to stay here? Has this all been for nothing? And she hears, believe a little bit longer, stay a little bit longer. It's that thing that she heard from Nat. It's what was written here, and that was the driving point for what brings her to pull Rick out of that helicopter at the end. That's what I believe, and I think that's where it's been going. And I got a lot more I could say on this episode. I know I went really long in the first episode and the second episode. I don't really have a whole lot to say here other than it's very interesting to see where this world's going to go. You just see this torn bit between Rick and Michonne. There's a bit of a rift there between them, and I think Rick's going to be kind of mad that Michonne pulled him out of there. He's going to be very scared for their life. And again, it's just an interesting and different way to see Rick. And I'm looking forward to seeing Rick back in his hardened point, that fighter of a character that we saw in earlier seasons of The Walking Dead. And I'm hoping we get back to that point with this character. But I'm loving what we're seeing here with this show. Every aspect of it, the writing, the acting, the cinematography, the music's really cool. A lot of callbacks to The Last of Us on this. A lot of inspiration. I could definitely tell that they were watching that show and they're like, we got to do something with The Walking Dead in this aspect. We got to do something with The Walking Dead here. Not turn it into The Last of Us, but let's get a little inspired by it. And I think they pulled the right inspiration
iterations of it, because it's not losing what The Walking Dead is, but it's adding a little bit extra flair, a little bit extra thematic elements of The Last of Us poured in there a little bit, and I love seeing that. Why not pull from something that was really great and add it to what you've got? And The Walking Dead's always been fun. Even when it's had its issues, it's been fun. So if I'm going to give this episode a ranking, it's going to be a 4 out of 5 or a B plus on the letter scale. I really enjoyed this episode. Didn't enjoy it quite as much as the first 2 episodes of the series, but I thought it was another win, another great episode of The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live. I really enjoyed it, guys, and I'm really enjoying this series. I am thoroughly loving these episodes, thoroughly loving the show. Can't wait for episode 4. So with that, let's move on to episode 4, What We. Episode 4 of The Ones Who Live was definitely not what I expected after episode 3. The last episode ends with Rick and Michonne falling out of that helicopter. They fall very safely in the water, so it wasn't anything crazy like they were going to fall into some trees, get injured on the way down, or anything like that. They seem to get away pretty well from the CRM, and they come to this place that at first I thought was possibly Rick's apartment. I thought maybe they made it back to the CRM, and Michonne was going to see that Rick had this nice, cushy life at the CRM. Maybe that's why he wasn't going back home. Maybe there were other reasons as to why he wasn't going back home. But we find out that this was a community called Greenwood. It was a community of inventors that had been formed after the fall of civilization. They had rebuilt their own little community, but it had fallen recently before the events took place here in this episode. However, this place is still up and running. It's nice. There's even a Roomba going around vacuuming up the apartment, keeping the place clean and tidy. And so Rick and Michonne find this place. It's a little safe haven for them. And this was an episode that was really allowed us to have a breather with these two characters, allowed for Rick and Michonne to hash out all the issues that they were having, allowed Michonne to really corner Rick, confront Rick, and get to the bottom of what was really going on with him. Why is he so unwilling to go back home to Alexandria with her? We learn a lot of interesting stuff in this episode. I'm not going to go beat for beat here, but I'm going to get to the meaty parts of the episode, the parts that really matter. One little note before I get going is there's this temperature control announcement that keeps going on, and at one point it hits Rick. He's so annoyed with it. He lashes out. He asks, where is this thing? What's going on? What keeps going off? What keeps giving this announcement? It ticks him off a little bit, but it's a reflection of the temperature in the room. The temperature raises as the conflict between Rick and Michonne increases. The temperature goes down as the conflict between them seems to cease and gets better. So it was a nice reflection of what was happening between the two of them. The building itself that they're in an interview with Denai Guerra, it was described as a cocoon for the two of them, of their relationship. And when the building comes down, when it all falls apart, it's the freeing of the shackles of Rick in the CRM. It's a new beginning for Rick and Michonne in their relationship. He's no longer trapped by the CRM, or he doesn't feel trapped by them anymore. Michonne doesn't feel like she is with a stranger anymore. She feels like she's now reunited with Rick. Their relationship is in a much better place at the end of this episode. But this episode was really about unpacking all that trauma that Rick had been going through, all of that trauma that she had, being absent away from him, absent away from her kids. And she reveals to Rick that he has a son, and she thought that that's what would have snapped him out of it. It wasn't. He was still unwilling to go back. And we come to the point of finding out that for Rick, this is all based on fear. It's all based on dying alone and losing the memories of the people that he loved. He says to Michonne that the whole reason that he was not willing to go back home, why he was going to stay there at the CRM, why he was so defeated, is that they took Carl away from him. They took the memories of Carl away from him. He could no longer see Carl's face. He could no longer hear Carl's voice. And that broke him so hard. Harder than he ever got broken by Negan with the Saviors in season 7. Harder than anything that had come before. He lost the memory of his son. And he was losing the memory of Michonne in that first episode of The Ones Who Live. He was about to lose her memory as well. And he was going to be at a place where he was so alone. It seems he's afraid to live. He's not afraid to die. He's afraid to live because he's so alone without those memories. Those memories are what kept him going, what gave him hope. And it's all taken away from him. And everything with Michonne had been taken away from him. So he was bought in. He was willing to go all in with the CRM because he felt that's all he had left. He found a way to keep going without the memories of the ones that he loves. He found a way to push on. And now that Michonne had come back into his life, he hit a crossroads as to whether or not he should stay with her or whether or not he should stay at the CRM. He felt that it was still the best plan, still the best course of action to stay at the CRM. He felt like he could really change things from the inside, and he was afraid of losing that part of himself again. And so rather than opening himself back up to these relationships that he had started to close himself off from, it was really about keeping him safe. How could he survive? He didn't feel like he could survive. He didn't feel like he could live if anything were to happen to the ones that he cared about. And he tells Michonne up front, he can't go on without her. If she was to die, he would die. But she convinces him, she shows him she's still there. And he's got kids back home. He's got a family back home. He's got a purpose back home. And together, they can get out of the situation. They can get home. And there's even an easy way out for them, because the helicopter that they were in, the helicopter that Michonne pulled her and Rick out of, it crashed. The CRM soldiers that were in that helicopter died in the building right across from them. So there was an easy way out, but it takes so much convincing from Michonne to get Rick home. Eventually she wins out, but she has to also come to a realization that this is not the man that she remembered. Rick is not who she remembered, not who she was expecting to see when she found him. And so she kind of has to go through a bit of a realization that Rick has changed. He's different. She was expecting one thing, and she's angry that he's not the version of Rick that she was expecting. And it's kind of what us as an audience had to go through too, because Rick is not who we expected to see in this state like we thought we would get when we started the show. And it's Michonne telling us, it's the show telling us Rick is different and this is why. And rather than get angry at him, rather than get angry at why he's different or be upset or disappointed at why he's different, let's accept where he is, accept the changes, accept the difference here. Understand this is where he's coming from now, and at that point you can move forward with him as a character, you can move forward with him, and then you could start to unpack all of the trauma that he had been dealing with. The CRM broke him so hard, but Michonne was able to lift him up out of that, remind him of the love that she has for him and that his kids and his family have for him, that there's still hope outside of the CRM. Thankfully, she is able to pull that out of him, and at the end of the episode, they're working as a unit again. Earlier they weren't. There was a lot of back and forth backbiting. Rick and Michonne try and take out this one walker, and she says that she had it, and Rick goes in and takes the opportunity to take that walker out. They're not coordinated with each other. He pulls the blade out of the walker, splatters blood on her, and she's like, really? Why did you do that? And he says sorry, but in a spiteful way. So there's a lot of backbiting with the two of them. There's a lot of unpacking to do with their relationship, but thankfully they come to a really good place at the end of the episode. As they leave, they find this car. It's a hybrid. It's both electric, but it's got gasoline. It's got everything they need to escape and move on. They're working as a unit again at the end of the episode. Rick, as we knew him, is back. We got the Rick Grimes that we were expecting to get at the beginning of the series. Now we've got him again. Him and Michonne go off on this road trip. Rick's saying, hey, we can do anything. The world is ours. Michonne's so happy to see this new side of him, surprised to see this new side of him, but nonetheless, they are working as a great unit, a great pair, and they ride off into the sunset. This is one of the happiest moments we've seen of the two of them in a long time, and you know it's not going to last, because this is the world of The Walking Dead. You know, we still got 2 episodes of the season left, and so that leads us right on in to the next episode, Become. This episode is called What We. The next episode is called Become. Finishing that sentence, What We Become, a callback to an episode in the main Walking Dead show. And so to give my final thoughts on this specific episode, I really enjoyed it. I don't have a whole lot to say other than unpacking everything that was going on, all the conversations that the two of them were having. This is really a conversation-heavy, exposition-heavy episode, so there was not really a lot of unpacking to do with this one. This is very much a bottle episode, but it was a much-needed episode because we really had to get to the bottom of what was going on with Rick, get past all of that, find a way to reconcile between Rick and Michonne. Thankfully, we got that, so now they're off on their journey, headed back home at the end of the episode. Will they get back home? Probably not. We'll see in the next episode, but for this one specifically, to give this episode a ranking, I've got to give it a 4 out of 5 or a B+ on the letter scale. I really enjoyed this episode. I think I would have liked to have gotten a little bit more of what was going on with the CRM, maybe what was going on with Jadis, our other characters that we've had in the show, more of what they were doing, but at the same time, this is a very Rick and Michonne focused episode. We needed to stay with the two of them, and I did appreciate that at the end. I really enjoyed this episode. It was a much needed episode, and I'm very excited to see what we've got in the next episode, episode 5, Become. Going to the very beginning of this episode, I was very pleased with where we were going after episode 4, and I was happy to see where we would be going moving forward. We had been hearing for a while, there's this character, this mysterious character from The Walking Dead that's supposed to be making their appearance in either episode 5 or episode 6. And so people were theorizing, is this going to be Morgan? Is this going to be a character, Silas from The World Beyond? Is it just Jadis that's going to be appearing to Rick and Michonne? And turns out it's going to be Father Gabriel, which for me, that kind of comes out of nowhere, but it also really makes sense for what this episode is trying to do. And it's these flashback moments with Jadis and Father Gabriel, because they had a relationship at the beginning of season 9 in those 5 episodes that Rick was in. And then as he was leaving, Jadis leaves with him, and that abruptly ends their relationship with each other. And it was really interesting to see this wariness that Gabriel has for Jadis, because remember, she tried to trade him to the CRM before Rick, and it didn't happen. She ended up trading Rick instead. And so it was really cool to see him back, because it feels like classic Walking Dead again. We're in the woods, we're fighting walkers, we come across other survivors, and we have other characters from the main show, other than Rick and Michonne and Jadis. Now you got Father Gabriel in the mix here. And he kind of gives you an insight on what's been going on in Rick's time away. As someone who had left the show, anytime Gabriel was giving us an insight on what was going on in Alexandria, what was going on with other groups, I was kind of put in Jadis's position almost, of someone who didn't know what was going on with the main group. Now I'm getting filled in, so that was nice. Coming at it from that perspective, it's different coming at it from that perspective. That was really cool. And I love seeing how Gabriel was affecting Jadis, or Anne, if you want to call her that, because Anne is her real name, and she's trying to get away. There's conflict in her in this episode. She's really trying to get away from this Anne character, and you see the conflict in her as Gabriel is talking to her, and you see that he doesn't really hold any harsh feelings towards her. There's a couple times, as they meet annually for this 3-year period. So, there's a little bit of some disdain for Anne, for Jadis from moment to moment, but then he always comes back around and he's like, forgive me, I'm sorry, I don't know where you're coming from here. He has faith in her in the end. He really has faith in her. And it's that faith that will really make the change later in the episode for how she's going to kind of come around and come to some form of redemption at the end of the episode when she's confronted by Rick and Michonne. The episode as a whole, focusing on Rick and Michonne, that aspect of it, there's not a whole lot to talk about there. They're on the road, they're going back to Alexandria, because as far as they know, the CRM believes they're dead, so nobody should be coming after them, nobody should be looking for them, and they're as confident as ever that they're going to get back. It's in these happy moments, you're like, well, this is the world of The Walking Dead. It can't continue like this forever. It certainly doesn't. They get interrupted by a group of survivors, which they easily take out. They come across Jadis, and Jadis uses them to her advantage. She talks them into coming to the CRM after she's attacked by Rick and Michonne, and uses them. They all come to their downfall. This is one of the weakest group of survivors I have seen in the entire series of The Walking Dead, and so it's actually surprising that they've made it 10, 11 years into the apocalypse, however far we are. It's kind of surprising that they've made it this far. My only guess is that they had a larger group with them at one point, and they were really the ones that were keeping them alive. They fall really easy here, but they got pretty far into it all. But going back to Rick and Michonne on their journey, they come across this cabin they're going to spend the night in. They found the noodles earlier. They're just enjoying their company with each other. They're enjoying the fact that they found each other again. And Michonne has found Rick. Not just Rick as he was in the first episode, but Rick as we knew him in The Walking Dead, in the main show. So she was able to dig that person out in episode 4. Everything came to a head. They had to figure out how they were going to get past past all the trauma that Rick was going through and all the expectations that Michonne had for meeting up with Rick again. And they got past that. They're at a great spot together, great place in their relationship now. And so it's going a little too easy. And I'll honestly say right here, I really like this episode, but I think one of the dumbest things of this episode, they left a trail of noodle wrappers all the way down the highway. That's how Jadis found them. They were just throwing the stuff all the way down the road. I was thinking maybe Rick had some kind of tracker in his fake arm that the CRM put in there or something like that. No, it's just that Rick just threw trash out the window, and that's how Jadis found him. I would have preferred another way that they had gone about it. That aside, I think the episode as a whole was really good, really solid. And we knew that they weren't going to be making it back to Alexandria. They're going back to the CRM after this, after their conflict with Jadis, and after Jadis gives Rick and Michonne all the information they need. Rick is going to get the Echelon briefing if he goes back to the CRM, and they also have to go back because with Jadis' death, there's the file that will tell the CRM about Alexandria and everybody that Rick and Michonne loves and cares for. She lets them know about where that file is, so they know that they now have to go back to get that file, and also for Rick to get the Echelon briefing so that he knows the full scale and scope of what the CRM is doing. And so let's cut to that aspect of it. Let's cut to that part. What is the Echelon briefing? Because we were told about it in the first episode. It obviously shaped Pearl Thorne when she got the Echelon briefing. It seems like she wasn't so sure about the CRM, but when she was given that briefing, it really shaped her perspective. You can see she has a different outlook on the CRM at that point. That was really interesting to see, like, what is this thing that Okafor said? I think about 10% of the military knows and 0% of the city knows what the Echelon briefing is. It's like the full scale and scope of what the CRM is up to, and I have a few theories about that. One is that the Echelon briefing is going to explain the CRM. I think they are threatened by the other cities. They had 2 other cities, and one has already fallen, so now there's 2 of them instead of 3 of them. I think their plan is to take out that other city so that the Philadelphia base can be the one that's completely in control. And another theory with the chlorine gas, I heard this tossed around already online, but maybe they're trying to both kill the living and the dead. So this gas maybe can completely eliminate all the walkers, and in doing so, it could also eliminate anybody who's still living out there so they can control the population outside of their walls. And I think that might be what their ultimate goal is. I actually think that's the most realistic thing here. That's what I think is actually going to be happening here. So taking out the other CRM city and then taking out anybody that's outside of their walls, both walkers and anyone who's living. That's what I think their ultimate goal is. Another theory is that the CRM, they were the ones who created the Walker virus and are the only ones who have the cure to it as well. And I think they may have possibly created this virus so that they could control over the world. And maybe it was a case of we have to bring the world down so that we can be the ones that can rise to power. And you realize the CRM was operating very quickly after the fall of civilization. I believe the helicopter that Rick saw in the first episode of The Walking Dead, in the episode Days Gone By, when he comes to Atlanta and he sees a helicopter, I think that helicopter, it could be the one that the National Guard guys had, that the governor came across in season 3, could have been their helicopter. That's one possibility. I think it was a CRM helicopter. And so if that's the case, they were around from the very beginning of the apocalypse, from the onset of the apocalypse. How are they prepared so quickly? How are they already ready for everything to come? It's possible that they are the ones who engineered the apocalypse. And if that is the case, if that is a revelation that we get in episode 6, that's crazy. I'm going to be floored if that's the case. Are they the ones who created the virus? Do they have a cure for the virus? Like, I don't know. That's a bit of a reach. That's probably the most exaggerated theory here, but I'm curious to see if that's the case. I'm also curious to see what characters might be possibly coming back. We got Father Gabriel in this episode. Is Morgan going to make an appearance in the finale? Are we going to lose anybody? Are we possibly going to lose Rick at the end of this season? I hope not. We just got him back. I don't want to be losing him so quickly. Is Michonne going to die? And now Rick's going to have to contend with that because he said she dies, he dies. He doesn't think he could ever make it beyond that. But maybe the fact that now he knows he has to get back to Judith, he's got RJ to meet. He's like, well, now I got a responsibility. I got to get back home, and I also got to warn people about the CRM. Is that a possibility? What happens here? Does Rick stay in the CRM? Does Michonne go back to Alexandria? Does Michonne die and Rick now has this mission on his own? Does Rick die and now Michonne's got to be the one to carry the mission forward, warn people in Alexandria and the Commonwealth? Really cool theories, really cool ideas tossed around here. And there's also this other theory that the first time we see Father Gabriel in the episode, that is actually not one of the flashbacks, but rather it is him seeing the helicopters possibly coming onto Alexandria, and Alexandria getting attacked by the CRM. So that might be a flash forward rather than a flashback where Father Gabriel is concerned. If that's the case, I'm really interested to see where they're going to go with that. I don't think this is the last time we've seen his character. I do think we'll see him again. We're going to see many other characters from The Walking Dead again, whether it be in this show or Daryl Dixon or Dead City, or whatever other show they end up doing going forward in the future. I know I kind of jumped all over the place on this, but these are just my initial thoughts on episode 5. Just some things that I thought were really cool. I was really happy with this episode. It felt like classic Walking Dead. I love the confrontation with Jadis and with Rick and Michonne, and I think this was a beautiful end to the arc of Jadis, a character that I really didn't like at the beginning of the series of the first time we saw her in The Walking Dead, and a character that I also really didn't like throughout most of this show because of what she was doing to Rick and Michonne, but she was a great foil for them, and I think in the end, Father Gabriel was right. She wasn't Jadis, she's Anne, and Anne won out. Anne told the truth. She let Rick and Michonne know what they needed to know so that after she passed, they could accomplish their mission, they could win. She didn't want them to go after the CRM, but I think in her heart, she knew that's the way it was going to go. She knew that was the direction it was going to go. So I was really pleased to see the end of her character. Still not one of my favorite characters in the Walking Dead universe, but I thought it was a great end to her arc overall. With that, let's give this episode a ranking. I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5 or an A- on the letter scale. Guys, these episodes have been firing on all cylinders. They've been very good. I have enjoyed all of them up to this point, and I'm super excited to see the series finale of The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live. And with that, let's move on to episode 6, The Last Time. The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live, Episode 6 has finally premiered. The series has finally come to an end, or rather, the season's finally come to an end. And I have a lot of thoughts about this episode. Overall, I really enjoyed The Ones Who Live. It was great seeing Rick and Michonne back on screen together after all these years. It was great to see what was going on with Rick in his absence from the main Walking Dead show. I was so happy to see the resolve there, to pick up with his story and to see and learn what he's been up to this whole time. I gotta say, it's not exactly what I was expecting to happen with the show overall, but it was pleasantly surprising. I was pleased with that result. And so the finale of The Ones Who Live, I'm mixed on it. I'll be honest, I'm mixed on it. I liked it overall, but I'm conflicted with how the CRM story was resolved. I feel like the CRM was taken out way too quickly. I don't really like how swift the army was taken out by Rick and Michonne. The fact that General Beale is already dead. I think there was a story there that you could have easily drawn out just a little bit more. And it didn't even have to go beyond the show, but I really just wish we had another episode or two to flesh out the CRM story, to really give more to Major General Beale, because I don't really feel like he was a great villain. I think that he had a lot of great scenes. Terry O'Quinn did an amazing job with this character, but I think there was a lot of build up and there was no proper resolve with his character. I don't feel like his character got his due. So as a villain, he was very disappointing, just in the fact that we really didn't get to see him do a whole lot. He had a lot of great speeches, a lot of great dialogue, and when he was giving Rick the Echelon briefing, I was really bought into what he was saying. It was gripping. It was very, very entertaining. And so him as a character, I thought really worked. I just wish we got a lot more with this character. I think that's the most disappointing aspect of all of this, is I wish we had gotten more with him, more with the CRM. I don't like that the CRM has seemingly been reformed overnight. I think that was done very abruptly, very quickly, but this is just kind of a nitpick of mine. I think I wanted more from that, but in the end, I have to think back to what was this show really about. This show was really about Rick and Michonne reuniting, and it was about bringing Rick home. It was about Michonne bringing Rick back. both back to who he was as the Rick Grimes that we knew, and then back home to Alexandria. So I'm going to skip to that ending scene when they get back to Alexandria, and Rick is seeing Judith grown up for the first time. Last time he saw her, she was a little toddler, and now he's seen her as a teenager, and meeting RJ for the first time. I've heard this sentiment online, and it's kind of what I experienced when I first watched the episode, was that Rick feels very awkward in the scene. There's not a natural reuniting with these characters, and I think a lot of that has to do with how the character would have felt, how Rick would have felt. You know, he's been away for 8 years, almost 8 years, missed out on all of this time, and he's got to wonder, you know, how do they perceive me? Are they going to hate me for being gone? Am I going to be welcomed back with open arms? Am I going to be rejected? I'm a stranger to these people, in a sense. I'm a stranger to my own children, and I think it was captured very well. You can see nervousness, and then you can see relief on Rick's face. Just the fact that he's being accepted by his kids. They're so happy to see him back. Rick and Michonne, RJ and Judith, they're all reunited. They're all home. I wish we had gone into Alexandria, but I'm pretty certain they're at least on the outskirts of Alexandria. So I was happy to see that. I was happy to see the reunion. I think with that taken into account, that part of the show was done very well. It was great seeing Rick come home, and I was so worried. There was one point in the episode when they're being attacked by all the walkers. Thorne is trying to kill Rick and Michonne. They're having this fight at the end after they've already gassed everyone. Rick's literally backed up into a corner, has a grenade, and it appears that Rick blew himself up. We cut to a commercial break for a quick second, and then we come back. It got me. It had me. I was like, no, there's no way they just killed Rick. I was glad they didn't. I was so relieved. That's one of the first times in a very long time when I was got by a fake out death. Immediately relieved, just like Michonne was. I was so worried that one of them was going to be killed at the end of this episode. And I didn't want either one of them to go because I was like, we just got them back. There's so much more story to tell. And with the end of this episode, I was so happy to see Rick and Michonne live in the end. They are the ones who live. And we're going to get more stories with Rick Grimes and Michonne. Nothing confirmed yet, but I'm 100% positive we will be getting more stories with these characters. Rick's going to be reunited with Daryl. He's going to see Negan for the first time since he saw him in the prison cell at Alexandria. So that's going to be an interesting interaction. Going to reunite with Maggie, hopefully with Morgan, because Morgan's searching for him after the end of Fear the Walking Dead. I'm just so looking forward to seeing all of these characters reunite eventually in the next couple years or so. I've kind of skipped around on this. It's going to be a little shorter recap review, probably not as long as my previous ones, but I don't have a whole lot to say other than I wanted a lot more from the CRM. I wanted a lot more from Major General Beale. I think the CRM was taken out a little too quickly. However, I was very happy to see the reunion with Rick and Michonne, with Judith and RJ at the end of the episode. As far as that is concerned, the very ending of the episode works very well. I do think the CRM was reformed a little too quickly, so maybe there's more story to tell there, because Beale did say some interesting things in his Echelon briefing. One thing was that the CRM has spies all over the globe in multiple communities, so maybe we'll get more CRM stories told there. I'm sure there's going to be some Beale supporters, Beale sympathizers in the world, so maybe there's a certain section of the CRM that will come back and be a problem for our group down the line. I hope to see more of that story fleshed out and told. I just think there was a bit of a mishandling with this finale. It did feel a little rushed. I wish we had gotten another episode or two. I think 8 episodes versus 6 episodes works a whole lot better. The length of each episode I think was fine. I didn't have an issue with that. I just wish we would have gotten at least one more episode, maybe focusing in on the CRM. I know this was a Rick and Michonne show, but I would have liked to have at least seen what our villains of the show were doing a little bit more from Beale, because Beale was a very interesting character. Every time he talked, I was so captivated with every little thing he was talking about. But there was one aspect of the Echelon briefing that I find very interesting. It's the whole reason why the CRM is taking out these other cities. They're taking them out for supplies, for resources, because Beale says the scientists of the CRM, they predict humanity only has about 14 years or so left as a species before they die out from sickness, from being bitten and turned into walkers, starvation, whatever it be. Humanity only has less than 20 years left on the planet, at least as a major group, before they start to go extinct. That was very interesting and kind of scary to hear. So did Rick make the right decision here? I know Beale wasn't going about things the best way. He may have had the best intentions, but does the end justify the means? And no, the means are not justified here. He was doing horrific things. The frontline military of the CRM was doing very, very horrific things. But was Beale right in the end? Will he be right, proven right in the end? That we have to do these drastic things, take drastic measures in order for humanity to survive. That's going to be really interesting to see if he was right in that scenario, but I think what Rick's thinking is, though, no, this is not the way to go about it. The only way we survive, the only way we continue as a species is if we are free and united together for this common cause. Not trying to take other communities out, but trying to fight for survival as a collective group, as a collective species. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see down the line as well. I'm very curious to see how that's going to play out. Overall, the episode itself, I was a little disappointed with how it was all resolved, how it all ended, but as a series from beginning to end, I was gripped week to week. I couldn't wait to see the next episode. Walking Dead Sundays are back to watching the show, watching this universe like I was when I was first watching The Walking Dead years and years ago. And so I'm very excited to be back in this universe, back in this world. I'm so excited that Rick and Michonne are back. Can't wait to see what other stories they're going to be involved with down the road. Can't wait to see more of that coming our way. On the specific episode, if I'm going to give it a ranking, I've got to give it a 3.5 out of 5 or a B- on the letter scale. It was a good episode overall. I was just a little disappointed with how the CRM stuff was dealt with, how the General Beale stuff was dealt with. I wish we gotten a little bit more from both of them, a little bit more from our adversaries in this story. But the Rick and Michonne aspect of it, that side of the story, very pleased to see how that turned out. And I was so happy to see the reunion with Rick and Michonne and Judith and RJ. That was great to see those two characters come in at the end of this episode. I think as a series overall, it was really enjoyable. The episode was just a little underwhelming. This is probably my least favorite episode of the entire series, but it's not a terrible episode either. I just wanted a little bit more out of it. It was slightly disappointing in some aspects, but I also had a lot of fun with it. And so again, this video is a little all over the place. I'm sorry I didn't go sequential throughout the episode. I'm not doing a breakdown. This is just a little recap and review my initial thoughts on these episodes. But with that being said, I do have more to say about the series overall. So now let's get into what I thought about the entire first season of The Walking Dead: The Ones Who Live. The Ones Who Live has been a very special entry in the world of The Walking Dead. I was once a huge fan of this world back when seasons 6 and 7 of the main show were on air, but I slowly fell off of watching everything up to the point that Rick left the cast back in season 9. It's nothing new, many fans share my experience, and I'm confident in saying that many fans like me have returned to this world because of this show. The Ones Who Live generated excitement for me in this world again. It's got me eagerly anticipating the next chapter in the overall saga of the universe. I'm not going to say this show has been without its faults. I have particular issues with the way the finale was handled, and the way characters acted at times. I think with a few more episodes and more time given to flesh out our villains and the overall narrative, it would have made for a more satisfying conclusion, but overall, I did have a lot of fun with this series. It was so great to see Rick and Michonne back on screen together, and this series made me appreciate their relationship more than the main show ever did. I feel like the writing greatly improved, in large part due to Denai Guerrera. Episode 4 was a great showcase of her talents where that is concerned. And while at times I felt the plot to be rushed, the show did have a very clear direction on where it wanted to go. There was a clear vision for this series, and you can tell that each person involved with the production of the show gave it their all and then some. While I had some frustrations with the series and many things that I could complain about, at the end of the day, I had a lot of fun with the show. Each episode was gripping, and it had me eagerly anticipating the return of the show every Sunday when a new episode premiered. I've said it before, but I truly feel that Walking Dead Sundays are back, and I can't wait to check out the next chapter when Daryl Dixon Season 2 premieres later this year. You can expect me to do videos videos covering that show as well once it arrives. To give this entire series a ranking, I've got to give it a 4 out of 5 or a B+ on the letter scale. It's definitely not without its faults, but overall I think it's a wonderful show and a fantastic entry in the world of The Walking Dead. There hasn't been an official announcement on whether we can expect there to be a season 2 of this series, but one way or the other, I'm fully confident we will see the return of Rick and Michonne in the near future, and I can't wait to see them on screen again. I hope you've all enjoyed the content I've produced over this series. These videos have been a lot of fun to work on, and you can expect more Walking Dead content coming to this channel very soon. Let me know what you thought of the first season of The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live, down in the comments below. Would love to hear your thoughts. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you get notified when new content goes live on this channel. I hope you all have an awesome and a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video.